Now, the SABC Board has announced the suspension of the Section 189 process at the broadcaster, this for another 30 days. And we're told that this is to allow for further consultations with relevant stakeholders on the planned retrenchment of 400 permanent SABC employees. Now, it follows a meeting this week with the broadcaster's executive and the Ministers of Communications and Labour, which was necessitated by ongoing protests by SABC staffers against the proposed retrenchments. The SABC maintains that the retrenchment process has been fair, and they've denied the extension of the suspension is an admission of wrongdoing in the process so far. So to discuss the latest developments at the SABC, we're joined by Minister of Communications and Digital Technologies, Stella Ndabeni-Abrahams. Minister, good morning. Thanks for your time.
Morning, ma'am, and morning to the viewers in their respective areas.
Minister, let me start by gauging your observations of what has been happening at the SABC in terms of the Section 189 process since its inception.
Well, probably let me talk to one thing first, that the Section 189 indeed is an administrative function or an operational matter, which I may not get involved. But now, as the shareholder, I have a responsibility to make sure that I make strategic interventions when I see that there's a trajectory that has been adopted by the public broadcaster. And of course, it's not going in the right way. In the right way, in this context, Sakina, that we've seen when the workers were protesting, threatening on blackout. And now that goes back to my responsibility that this is the time that I must make intervention, because we cannot afford to deprive South Africans of the right to information through the public broadcast mandate that we have given to SABC. That is what necessitated the intervention around Section 189, without saying, no, the board is wrong on doing this or it's not right. As I said, it's an operational matter. But probably you would also want to see, because as I've been listening to different presentations, there's this insinuation that, yes, this is part of the turnaround strategy that the minister approved, and correctly so, but I would want to put into context and exactly how we categorized it through the GTEC that we commissioned to assist SABC in its development of the turnaround strategy. And the detailed steps that were outlined there, this is what we are intervening on to say, we have noted that these are the processes and the steps that were detailed, but we are not satisfied that we followed all of them. As much as we appreciate that, of course, it is reported that about 42% of the budget of SABC goes to the workforce. And indeed, there is a need to make sure that we cut on those costs. But there are areas that the turnaround strategy talks to, which were defined by the GTEC on the conditions, as I said. If you allow me, the steps that we spoke about talks to development of the holistic operating model for the corporation. And this operating model is inclusive of a proposed organizational structure and associated job profiles to serve as a basis for a staff optimization. Those are the contents of the turnaround strategy. The second element, conduct a skills audit, not a certificate verification. A skills audit of the existing workforce to assist with decisions on the matching and placement of staff in the proposed organizational structure, and to guide their training and development. To say we do understand that Stella may not meet these requirements, but we're looking at the expertise that she has, the level of growth that she has acquired in the organization, and appreciating that we're taking a different form. Is it possible for us to upskill Stella so that she can be relevant? And those are the things that are talking to the skills audit process. Of course, the critical one again, consult key internal and external stakeholders, inclusive of the recognized, organized unions. As I said, we met with the unions, we met with the board, whom they all gave us their side of the story. And again, even in the spirit of meeting with the board after we've heard the unions, it was not to say we are here to tell you what to do, but to advise you in order to avoid an unnecessary blackout that could be avoided. If there are parties who are saying, yes, you engaged us as the unions, but there was not enough time to go and engage with our workers, there were certain things that we were not satisfied with. So we appealed to all parties to say, please go back to the table and make sure that you engage robustly, but also honestly. Don't just follow the process because it's a compliance matter. Make sure that everything that we do is in the interest of SABC. The last one, of course, talks to the development of a proposal for populating the structure that considers viable options such as retraining, as I said, early retirement and voluntary severance packages. These are the things that are entailed, and even when you engage with the unions themselves, they have a full appreciation of that. But all they are saying is that we need to know who has what in SABC and what does SABC need in the new structure, so that we do not go and get new resources if we understand that there are people that can be upskilled within, because we may end up having to reduce the number that must be cut off. But of course, ours is to say, satisfy all these processes so that the retrenchments are the last resort. This is the message that we've been hammering both to the board, to Parliament and the public, to say, yes, we understand that SABC is in a financial crisis. And of course, these are things that must be followed. But there are proposals that are being made, which is why we ask for consideration of other alternatives that can make sure that SABC remains functional, but most importantly, relevant and productive. Because that's very important as we engage with the unions also. It's not just about saying we don't want retrenchments. No. Ourselves as the shareholder representatives are not union leaders to say, no, don't go for this part. Ours is to make sure that the organizational is functional and productive and responsive to its mandate. Therefore, when we look at the challenges that are faced by the organization, we look at them holistically. What is the entire ecosystem that will give us a functional broadcaster that must carry out its public service mandate effectively? This is why we then sat with Minister Ngesi and the team that we met with in terms of SABC Board and management. We said from our side, we are prepared to do what we can do in terms of the reforms that are required that must help SABC, including addressing the challenges in terms of the funding model. But that again requires SABC to be able to say, not to thumbsuck and say it's R1 billion, it's 2 million rands, but to say, according to the public service mandate, these are the components that go to it. If you go to the GTAC recommendations of the turnaround strategy, they also say SABC do identify media assets that can be sold, those that are not profitable. And as part of doing that, we're able to say, if I do away with these media assets, I'm able, therefore, to generate so much revenue that must then be invested in the business towards what you want to achieve. As you do that, therefore, you're able to say, this is the capability, this is the model that I want to take now, focusing not on the commercial side, but focusing on the public service minded. And when you do that, it says if you are cutting away, for example, some of the media assets, if they respond to the public service mandate, you should be able to tell us to say, if I do away with this, this is the impact. Key to this is ensuring that SABC leads not only in terms of information, but building social cohesion. Amongst those is to ensure that SABC is able to broadcast in all official languages, which is something that does not happen with other broadcasters. These are the things that we take into consideration. The sporting rights that people want to have access to, we've got to look into the entire ecosystem to say, here we recognize that the law does not really enable the public broadcaster to fully deliver on its mandate, and therefore, how do we review that? There are proposals already in the table, but most of the proposals that, as I said earlier, require much time because they are policy related and consultations with other stakeholders are required. We then said we're going to set up a team made of our officials from my department and the Minister of Labour, that one looking into the areas where he's responsible in terms of his areas of responsibility to say what can he bring on the table to assist, but from our side to say how do we then engage the regulator and how do we change policies in relation to the public service mandate.
And that, of course, is key, Minister. There have been concerns about, all of these processes being above board, that there is transparency in the processes as they unfold. And unfortunately, the SABC being accused of being less than candid and coming forth and basically negotiating in good faith around all of these matters that you've just alluded to. And you've also spoken about the fact that there must be engagement once again between board, management and staff. And looking at how far, or perhaps not so far, these particular engagements have gone, looking at the results to date, how do you then envisage, us finding a way forward as the public broadcaster? Because we have these pickets every day. There's concern that some of the assets of the SABC may have been earmarked for commercialization, and that things are being run down so that they can be sold off cheaply to those who may be waiting in the wings. How do you as the minister then ensure that all of these processes actually unfold from here on in a transparent and fair manner?
Of course, as I have delegated Deputy Minister of the Department, Ms. Gegana, she's the one that has been dealing with those. But before any other entity sells properties or assets that belong to the state, they have to get the approval of the shareholder. I have checked with her. That is why we are saying we had urged all the parties to go back on the table. Because in her reports and the departmental reports, they've stated their dissatisfaction with the process themselves as they undertook to engage all the stakeholders. Therefore, ours was to say, let's therefore meet with the board and share these concerns and appeal to all parties, even the unions, not to say this way or that way. There shouldn't be any winner in all of this. We just want to make sure the winner remains SABC. Nobody must just be saying, I came on the table with this and therefore this is what I'm going to live with. Otherwise, there's no room for engagement. That's the emphasis of our message, to say, go back, deliberate, try to convince each other, but most importantly, be able to compromise when needs arise so that SABC does not get to be compromised in its entirety. The second thing that you're talking about, as you're talking to the selling of the assets, we are not intending to privatize SABC. Even when I made reference to the selling of the media assets, it is those media assets that we feel like they're not adding value. Remember, when we establish entities, there's a strategic intent of any entity that we establish that we want to see as the shareholder representative. But on top of that, there's the socio-economic impact that we want to realize. We may have established a particular radio station, I'm making an example, to achieve a particular strategic intent. But if it is not responsive to the socio-economic impact, it does not help us. I'm going to make an example, Sakina, with the post office that I also preside over. People expect post office to be commercially driven completely. Yes, a component of the post office is supposed to be like that, but the post office does not exist to make money, but to make sure that they deliver, they bridge the gap between government and the locals where they are, bringing government closer to people. So as we look at the commercial viability of an entity, we also look at the socio-economic impact. Did we just establish this entity to make money out of it, or we established it in order to fulfill a particular mandate, in this context of SABC being a public service mandate that must make sure that our people are educated, our people are informed, our people are entertained at all times. Therefore, what are the necessary components that are required for SABC to fulfill that mandate? And this requires, as I said, not only the policymaker or the board, unfortunately. It requires all of us, because the board can go up to so far, just like the shareholder can go up to so far, and that's the role of other key stakeholders. It is in this spirit that we are saying, let's all work together. We really need calm or cool heads to make sure that we focus at what matters in this context. And what matters is that the people of South Africa must get the information that they're supposed to get. SABC must not go for a blackout. Does it mean that we're going to fold arms and say there's no 1.2 billion or whatever? No, we're not going to fold arms. But we've got to look at these critical areas that disable SABC from discharging its responsibility fully, and also ensuring that the board and the management, they do what they are supposed to do. Amongst the GTEC recommendations, once more, there's a point that talks to revenue enhancement by the management and the board. We've got to see those initiatives, that these are the initiatives. So far in the reports that I've received from the department through the Deputy Minister and the ADG, they're saying SABC is still on the red. I appreciate that Probably that was done before the close of the financial year. And now I had the team saying, which minister were improving. And we really welcome those, looking forward to say, let's see a change. Let each party play its own role. The workers must make sure that they remain productive and they empower themselves accordingly. SABC has to upskill people. I also got news when we had a meeting with Minister Nqesi that SABC has even stopped paying for skills development and bursaries. And you cannot say you are taking a particular route and then you're not investing in that. These are the things that we're saying we may undermine and think they're not important. But unfortunately, investing in human capital is what we are for. The SABC is about people that are driving the work that it does today. With all the challenges that we are talking about, we're still grateful to the employees of SABC. We've never went home saying we couldn't watch this program because SABC had no capacity. It tells you of the dedication and the commitment of the workers of SABC, which is why all those that are involved in terms of strategy development and oversight should play their part and not want to be territorial on the work that needs to be done. It is not about Stella or the minister. It is not about Parliament. It is not about the board, but it is about the people of South Africa. That's why I want to also urge all South Africans to make sure that they pay their TV licenses, which is one of the revenue-generating initiatives that SABC introduced.
Now, Minister, can I please ask you to please just stay with us? Speaking of the public service mandate, unfortunately, this is where we say goodbye to our SABC2 viewers, and we'll pick this up again with them tomorrow at 6 a.m. And people have been complaining about this particular aspect as well, that it would seem as though if you are not well heeled and you cannot afford to pay for a satellite television, you miss out on the final hour of Morning Live. Unfortunately, that is the reality. These are some of the many issues that still beg discussion. So we have to say goodbye to our SABC2 viewers, unfortunately. We'll see you again tomorrow morning, bright and early, but we'll carry on into the third and final hour and carry on the conversation with Minister Stella Ndabeni-Abrahams on SABC News 404.